The NHS was a selfless gift from a government to its people. Everybody deserves free healthcare, so we're going to give it to you because we're really nice. That's what they'd like you to believe, anyway. After the war, the UK was skint. They had no money and even more debt, and they needed to get the economy going again. The problem was that many of their economically valuable population, that was working aged men, had died during the war or become incapacitated in some horrible way. The solution to this was the creation of the NHS. It gave everybody access to free, high quality healthcare, just out of the goodness of the hearts of the people in power. Wrong. The NHS ensured that working aged men and women stayed economically active by treating their illnesses to keep them healthy for longer, and more importantly, keep them working for longer. The NHS also provided stable employment for huge numbers of people, as doctors, nurses, and other staff, to further stimulate the economy. I mentioned this in a video about possible AI futures because it illustrates an important fact. The reasons that governments sell you an act of generosity like the NHS may not reflect the actual intention behind this act. It's important to note that 75 years after its inception, the NHS is chronically underfunded and falling apart. It's funny that the NHS has steadily declined since the baby boomers bolstered the economy with large numbers of healthy workers to ensure the economic engine runs at full power, isn't it? Things always seem to change when people in power have less incentive to maintain a public service. So why does this relate to AI, you may ask? Well, it relates to three new letters which have recently come into existence. UBI. UBI stands for Universal Basic Income. It is currently being sold to us by AI superscalers as the solution to predicted massive job displacement, which has been promised by the advancement of artificial intelligence. The premise is simple. The AI take all our jobs. The surge in productivity from AI means governments can afford to hand out money for free to the displaced workers, and everyone lives happily ever after in utopia. Maybe, maybe not. You see, UBI could be a utopian gift from the AI gods to us, or it could be a gift from the AI gods to themselves. You see, when people lose their jobs and can't afford to eat or live in a house, they get kinda angry. And if a large number of people get kinda angry, they form angry groups who talk to each other and get even more angry. When they get really angry, they start to protest, destroy things, and loot business. As you can imagine, this is generally not seen as a good thing by governments and businesses. And you can see the point, I guess. Current police forces and the army can usually contain these groups of angry people and maintain the peace. But what happens when millions of people can no longer afford to eat and form groups of millions of people and start riots? The people in charge at this stage would surely lose control. So UBI could be seen as a price that those in power have to pay to ensure their populations of people stay peaceful, especially during a period of serious disruption like the AI singularity. So we all get to live our lives in relative comfort without ever having to do horrible things like work in exchange for this life. Sounds good, or does it? AI seems to be on a mission to revolutionize all modern day work on a huge scale. But what else could it revolutionize? What if it revolutionized policing and surveillance? What if the government, or whoever was in power at the time, created the perfect police force? Imagine a world where advanced surveillance ensures 99% of all attempts to demonstrate or protest were snuffed out by the perfect police before they ever became substantial. Imagine that even in 1% of cases where people managed to evade this, their attempts to protest against their mistreatment were ended by the efficiency of the perfect police force there and then. If the incentive for UBI is public peace, you can see that in this instance, the incentive for UBI starts to become less incentivizing. Maybe the comfortable life that UBI provides becomes more like a simple life. Maybe the UBI becomes so basic that people can barely get by with the handouts that government gives them. Imagine a world where people have no money, no means to work to access more money, no way to protest about the fact you have no money, just a country full of useless eaters trying to get by on the scraps handed to them by people in power. It doesn't sound great. I'm not saying that this is guaranteed to happen. Maybe the people who gain the most from AI are happy to hand out their profits and tax to governments, and maybe the governments are happy to hand out this income as UBI to its people, because deep down, everybody just wants everybody to be happy. But a saying comes to mind: history doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme. The NHS is a great example of something that seemed pure in its reasons for inception, but when the majority of the gains were made by the people in charge. Establishments like UBI and the NHS are always created because the creator has something to gain from it as well. We need to be wary of what happens when the people with the most control no longer have reason to deliver things like UBI. When you ask the question, why has the NHS got worse and worse over the decades since its inception? Poor management? Aging population? Reduction in tax revenue? Or is it simply that the government doesn't need it to be any better than it already is? They already have enough people in work and working for long enough. I don't think UBI will ever get taken away. That would be stupid. Even with a perfect police force, governments will still want relative peace in its population. I think what we can learn here is to always question the real motives behind what seems to be an act of progress or selflessness by a government or other large organisation in charge. We will need to be even more certain of UBI, and if it becomes reality in the future. We will also need to ensure that we keep in mind that UBI may not last forever, and that we should plan for a future when UBI no longer exists, to ensure we safeguard our families for as long as possible if it is taken away from us. I'm thinking that maybe I stockpile during the good years of UBI to make sure I have something left if the funding dwindles out in the future. I think this is important because I don't think we'll be able to fight back or change votes or apply any political pressure to governments when the UBI is eventually taken away.